Hey guys, today we are comparing a 1988 Jeep Comanche to a brand new Jeep Gladiator to see how Jeep pickups have evolved. So if you look back in the 1980s, Jeep actually went through quite a shift in ownership. In the early 80s, they were owned by AMC, or American Motors Corporation, but by the late 80s, they were actually owned by Chrysler, and then Daimler, and then Fiat, and now Peugeot. But my point is that Jeep has really undergone a lot of different generations, and 88 was an interesting era because it was technically AMC, and you can see that on the key. In the front you've got Jeep, and on the rear you've got American Motors. But it was the very beginning of Chrysler, because if you look around the Jeep, you'll see the Chrysler Pentastar in several locations. The Comanche here is a very interesting pickup truck, and it came at a very interesting time because this truck was built to compete with competitors like the Ford Ranger, the Nissan Hardbody, and the legendary Toyota pickup of the mid-1980s. But you see, at the time, Jeep was owned by AMC, or American Motors, which by the mid-80s wasn't doing so hot, and building a truck from the ground up is quite expensive. It takes a lot of cash, something that AMC simply didn't have. AMC at the time had several toys they could have played with when developing a small pickup. They had the CJ7, which was the predecessor to the Wrangler, but there were some more problems with that because Jeep had already made a small pickup based off the CJ. It was called the Scrambler, and other products in the AMC lineup were either cars or far too big. But there was one that may fit the bill, the Cherokee. Cherokee came out in the early 80s as a kind of compact crossover, so it made a lot of sense to turn it into a pickup. But being a compact crossover, the Cherokee was actually unibody, which is great when developing kind of small, efficient cars, but not so good when you want to load 1,000 pounds of rocks into the bed. So here's what the fine folks at Jeep did. In the front, the Comanche is pure Cherokee. The engine, most of the bodywork, even the door is pretty similar. The interior is basically exactly the same. And then in the rear, you've got a bed. But in the front, because it's Cherokee, it's unibody. So under the bed, they added an X-member frame to make it tough and strong. And they called the solution the Uniframe, which is just hilarious. The compact pickup truck market has changed quite a lot here in the US. First of all, they're not all that compact compared to what they used to be, but back in the 1980s, this class of pickup truck was dominated by utility. It was all about how much you could haul, how much you could carry, how much you could tow. So you see a lot of that representation in the bed length. Now the Comanche was built to be a work truck, and I want to get that clear. First and foremost, it was available in four-wheel drive, but a lot of them were two-wheel drive trucks, and a lot of them were long beds, 7-foot beds. This one you see right here is kind of a unicorn. It's a four-wheel drive short bed truck, but even the short bed truck is pretty massive in terms of its utility. Let me grab the tape measure and see just how long this bed is. All right, so there is the bulkhead all the way here to the edge of the bed, and there you have it, just over 6 feet. So the short bed version of the Comanche has a bed that is longer than the only bed available on the Gladiator. How about the width? Let's take a look at the width here. It's roughly 5 feet wide from wall to wall. The other cool thing you see on these Comanches is this little curve right here. So once again, focus on utility. This little curve is so that if you have straw or rocks or grain or anything back here, you get your shovel actually into the corner and scoop up there along the curb. It's not a hard edge. You can see this one's been clearly used quite a lot. This was actually a farm truck out in, I think, northern Colorado for many, many years. But back in the day, people didn't bedline them. They just use them as trucks, throw rocks and stuff in here, get beat up, and that's just how it was. Of course, some tie downs here on both ends, and then even these little rails here if you wanted some extra tie downs along the side of the bed. Very useful, very used, very good. Fast forward 25 and some years, if you're good at math, then you'll find that the Gladiator has changed quite a lot, because the Jeep Gladiator is now a lot more of a lifestyle truck. Now, a lifestyle truck is for someone who wants somebody else to think they do outdoorsy stuff like mountain biking and climbing and badminton. And the Gladiator is definitely up to the task, because this truck has gotten a lot more comfortable, a lot more usable for families, and a little bit less usable for the working man. The Gladiator only comes in one cab and one bed configuration, a crew cab and a short bed. And when I say short bed, I do mean a much shorter bed. This one is only 5 feet long in length versus 6 or 7 in the Comanche. And width-wise, what are we looking at here? Yep, just under 5 feet wide. So a much smaller box, but there are some things that are nicer that we just didn't really have in the 1980s in the back of the Comanche. For example, not only do we have the tie downs front and rear, but we have these little bed lights that illuminate and let you see what you're working on at night. And this is pretty handy too. If you actually have longer items, you can fold up the tailgate, and check this out, I can actually use little cables, hook them into these little eyelets, and now look at that. I've got a little bit of ramp so stuff doesn't come flying out if I'm hauling longer items. I mean, that's nice, it's very well thought out, but it's not quite as usable in terms of overall size as the Comanche. Now, we actually have taken both of these vehicles off-road at the same time in Moab, and they both performed very well, with certain upsides and drawbacks for each. Take a look.
All right, Tommy, we like to call this one butt clencher.
Great. Butt clencher. At least I have 30-year-old brakes, so that's ideal.
Down the butt clencher. Oh, God. Actually, the brakes are really good. Oh, not that good, though. They're good, but they're not that good, apparently. Hey, but we made it down.
It's hard to tell you exactly how steep this is, but it's super steep. And I'll have no problem here. I'll of course scrape again at the bottom, as one does in the Gladiator. This is like 30 degrees of straight down. Oh my, oh my, oh my. Seat belts are holding me in place.
This Jeep does really pretty well, actually. I've been pretty blown away with how it's performed off-road. The flex isn't super great, but the ride is surprisingly comfortable, and there is a ton of ground clearance. Okay, let's see, we're gonna hit here. Front feels fine. How about the back? Oh, back feels okay too, actually. Yeah, look at that, not bad.
What's the crawl ratio on the
Comanche?
Yeah.
It's just not very good.
Okay, do you know what this one is? We know what this one is?
It's really good, yeah. So this has got 410s, and it also has a really low transfer case as well. The Comanche's got 307s, and now that it has 33s on it, it's not very good. But we're about to see the disadvantage of being about as long as,
Oh, a semi-truck?
I was gonna say school bus, but we can say semi-truck too.
Let's see if I hit on this. This is a test of departure and approach angle. Am I gonna scrape? Oh yeah. I felt that. Definitely scraped. Knew that was coming. Knew that was coming for sure. I did scrape, dude.
So did you get a hemorrhoid?
No, I didn't get a hemorrhoid. I just scraped a little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah, a little bit.
On a scale of 1 to hemorrhoid, how bad did you scrape?
You know, that nice cushy ride is well worth the extra length of the truck. Plus it means I can, you know, put more stuff in the back. I actually have room in my back seat for like real people. There were several engines available in the Comanche between 86 and 92, ranging from small fuel injected 4-cylinders to some terrible 2.8 liter carbureted V6s, but this is by far the best engine, the 4-liter straight 6. Legendary durability. These engines will go 200,000-300,000 miles with little difficulty. Super well made, super strong. However, this is kind of an interesting generation of 4-liter, because from 87, just a couple years onwards,
Renault at the time had a partnership with AMC, and they used an engine management system called Renix, which was a combination of Renault and Bendix, and it was a super early ECU-based microprocessor engine management system for the electronic fuel injection. It had a knock sensor, it had a crank position sensor, and it was just very unreliable. So as strong as these engines are, the electronics that surround them can be a little bit dicey. The 4-liter in this 88 Comanche is rated at about 177 horsepower and just over 220 pound-feet of torque. And that sent this power through this transmission right here. Now, there were many different transmissions available, but most of them were manual transmissions. These were working trucks. This one has an interesting story because this is called the BA10, which was a transmission built by Peugeot, because as you recall, in the 1980s, American Motors Corporation had a partnership with Peugeot, and it was just an absolutely horrific transmission, terrible in just about every way. But there were good transmissions available, such as the Aisin AX15. There was an automatic called the AW4, which was very strong, but this one is very poor. Now, the funny thing is that Jeep today is owned by FCA, or Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, who recently just merged with Peugeot. So Jeep, once again, is back in a partnership with Peugeot. How funny is that? In the front, there's only one engine option, and it's actually a pretty good one. It's a 3.6 liter gasoline V6. It develops 285 horsepower, 260 pound-feet of torque. So 100 more horsepower, but only about 40 more pound-feet of torque. And it's actually a fairly decent engine. It gets much better fuel economy than the old Comanche. I've been averaging 17 or 18 in this truck versus like 12 in the old truck. Having said that, I much prefer the 4-liter just because it's got all its torque way down low. It is super smooth and it is dead reliable. However, there are certainly a lot of things that the Gladiator does better than the Comanche. I'm talking about luxuries and creature comforts. Take things such as bougie objects such as headrests and seats that will fit not only short people, but tall people as well. But in all seriousness, the inside of this Gladiator Rubicon has just about every creature comfort you'd find in something like a BMW or Mercedes. Dual zone automatic climate control, heated seats, heated steering wheel, remote keyless start, you've got an 8-speed automatic transmission, automatic windows, you've got a full digital infotainment cluster. I mean, yes, these trucks have gotten so much more expensive than the old ones, but this truck has basically replaced the luxury vehicle, the pickup truck, and the family hauler all in one go. The interior in these old Comanches and even Cherokees, because it's basically the same, are brutally honest and just lovely. I mean, there's a lot of plastic everywhere, but the design is so 80s. It's very driver-centric here, and everything is within reach. Everything is easy to use. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I love these 80s and 90s Jeep steering wheels. Very thin, but a beautiful design with these aluminum spokes and small center cap. Now, the gauges are also super clear. They tell you everything you really need to know: oil pressure, temperature, fuel, speed tachometer, and of course your voltage. But other things in here, well, you've got, you know, old school cassette deck there. Air conditioning was an option on this truck. This one has it, doesn't work unfortunately, but heat and AC. And then you've got a really pretty good sized glove box because of course there are no airbags front or rear, with a lot of cubby space. The funny thing is that these old trucks are almost entirely single cabs. If you look in the 80s, very few were sold as extended cabs or crew cabs, and the Comanche was only available as a single cab, which is good and bad. It's good because you got a lot of room in the back for stuff in the bed, but it's bad because if you've got two people in here, you really can't carry anything of personal possessions like backpacks or bags or groceries. You're just kind of stuck. You can actually carry 3 people because the Comanche has a bench seat here, but the middle person better get used to having a knob in his knob. Look how sophisticated, Alex. R-E. Litre. Litre. So what about capability? Well, actually, these Comanches could tow, haul, and carry a ton. Well, not quite literally a ton. You see, this Comanche had a payload of about 1,400 pounds, which is actually 200-ish pounds more than the Gladiator. Towing capacity was maxed out about 5,000 pounds. However, if you got a long bed Comanche with a metric ton package, it was called, this thing could carry over 2,000 pounds. In fact, the Comanche was well known for its ability to carry a crap ton of stuff. If you did opt for four-wheel drive with your Comanche, you got solid axles front and back, actually just like that new one, and there was even a couple off-roady options, but no chance of locking differentials or sway bar disconnects. Instead, what you got was stuff like this front skid plate here. Now, in terms of suspension, the Comanche actually runs coils front and leaf springs in the rear, which makes it ride a little bit more like an old school truck than the comfy Gladiator. Sure, that old Comanche may have been pretty good off-road for 1988, but this new one will blow it away. I mean, sure, you still have solid axles, but this time you've got differential locks both front and rear. You also have a disconnectable front sway bar. You've got skid plates throughout the entire vehicle. You've got rock rails, a lot of ground clearance. There's off-road modes, and there's even Fox shocks for coil springs all around. So yes, that old one is good, but this new one is just far better. Alright, so far better off-road may be a little bit of a stretch, because the biggest issue with the Gladiator is that it's so stretched. It's just got such a long wheelbase. Now, of course, the Gladiator's gotten a lot more expensive than these old school trucks. The one you see right there, MSRP's at $55,000. But then again, you also get a lot more capability in terms of towing, but also a lot more safety. You have real crumple zones, airbags, headrests, you've got ABS, traction control, stability control. All of it is cooked into the new one, where the old one just didn't even dream of having that safety equipment. But then again, you also have a lot more kind of charm and character with the old one. It's got that honesty and that rawness that is missing a little bit in the new Jeep products. Now let me know in the comment section below, which one do you prefer, the old school work truck or the new school off-road toy? And as always, this is Tommy with the Fastlane Car and the Fastlane Truck. Head over to tflcarandtruck.com for the latest and greatest in new car and truck reviews.